Pause this video right now. Go down to the comments and type your full last name. Seriously, do it now, because there's a 70% chance that the name you carry isn't actually yours. Over the next 8 minutes, I'm going to show you how the United States government executed the largest identity theft in history, and how your last name might be living evidence of a crime that started over 120 years ago.
Good morning, family. Hope all is well. We're going to get right into the content. It's about talking about how land was stolen, how our identity was stolen. The foundation, Black American Indians, and the Black Israelites. And I want to thank you all so much for your support. And please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And you can also go to YouTube and look at content, this content at Cozy's News at Poopadoo 1760.
I'm talking about the Black Indian Registry, a system that turned entire families into ghosts. And if you have ancestors from the South, especially Oklahoma, North Carolina, or Virginia, you need to hear this. This isn't some distant historical footnote. This is active. This is now. There are people alive today who remember their grandparents being told to hide their native heritage, to straighten their hair, to never speak the language, to forget the old ways, all because a piece of paper said they were the wrong kind of Indian. The official story they taught you is simple. Africans were enslaved, natives were removed. End of story. Two parallel tragedies that never touched. But here's the problem. They weren't parallel. Between 1650 and 1900, hundreds of thousands of people lived in what historians now call the invisible space, communities where Black and Native bloodlines merged so completely that the government couldn't control them. These weren't just random encounters. We're talking about the Black Seminoles in Florida who fought 3 wars against the U.S. Army. These weren't just allies, they were family, brothers-in-law fighting side by side, cousins sharing the same campfire, children who grew up speaking Muskogee and carrying African names. Maroon societies hidden in the Great Dismal Swamp, where Africans and natives built entire towns that lasted for decades, towns with their own governments, their own trade networks, their own culture that blended drumming traditions with tribal ceremonies. And families in the Carolinas who carried both Cherokee blood and African ancestry, people who hunted with bows, spoke indigenous languages, and practiced both African spiritual traditions and native ceremonies. These communities were thriving, they were powerful, and that's exactly why they had to be destroyed. And then came 1898, the year everything changed. The Dawes Commission rolled into Indian Territory with one mission: create a registry, put everyone in boxes, decide who gets land, decide who gets citizenship, decide who gets to keep their identity. Here's what they don't teach you. The registry was designed to fail certain people. If you had dark skin, even if your grandmother was full-blood Cherokee, even if you spoke the language fluently, even if you lived on tribal land your entire life, even if you participated in tribal ceremonies and knew every elder by name, you got a different card, a freedman's card. And that card meant one thing: you weren't Indian anymore. Overnight, thousands of families lost everything, not just land, not just citizenship. Their entire identity was legally erased. Now let me show you the evidence they tried to bury, and I mean literally bury. Some of these documents were hidden in archives for over a century. Exhibit A, the surname trick. Look at the 1880 census for Creek Nation territory. You'll find families with names like Freeman, Butler, and Washington listed as Indian. Same families, same addresses, same land, same children. Now jump to the 1900 census. Same names, same land, same people living in the same houses, but now listed as Negro or mulatto. What changed? Not the families, not their blood, not their way of life, just a bureaucrat's pen. One stroke of ink and generations of identity disappeared. I want you to understand how deliberate this was. Census takers were given explicit instructions. If someone has dark skin, mark them as colored, regardless of what they tell you about their heritage, regardless of the language they speak, regardless of how they live. Exhibit B, the $5 Indian. While black Indians were being systematically kicked off the rolls, stripped of their land rights, and told they weren't native enough, white settlers were literally buying their way in. Pay a commissioner $5, that's it, just $5, get listed as Cherokee by blood, and claim 160 acres of prime tribal land. This wasn't happening in the shadows. This wasn't some conspiracy theory. This was policy, documented, receipted, legalized theft with a paper trail. There are records of white families who had never set foot in Indian territory, who couldn't name a single Cherokee ancestor, who didn't speak a word of any native language, getting enrolled while families who lived tribally for generations were denied. The message was clear. Indian identity wasn't about blood or culture. It was about money and skin color. Exhibit C, the Virginia Genocide. In 1924, a man named Walter Plecker became the registrar of Virginia's Bureau of Vital Statistics, and he had one mission: racial purity. He created the Racial Integrity Act. His job? Erase every mixed race identity in Virginia. If you had one drop of African blood, you were colored. Period. End of discussion. Thousands of Monacan, Pamunkey, and Mattapony families who lived as Native Americans for 300 years.
And it seems they try to erase us every 100 years, every so many centuries. They begin to erase black history. But this time, our generation, our young generation, we're not having that anymore. Our history will be told if we tell it ourselves like our grandparents did.
Families with documented tribal histories going back to Pocahontas woke up one morning and were legally black. Their birth certificates were altered. Their marriage licenses were voided. Their children...
That should tell us all the descendants of slaves, because if you look at our birth certificate, they should say black, Negro, or mulatto. We are the people they stole the land from. It's on our birth certificate.
School records were changed. Family Bibles were confiscated if they showed Native ancestry. One man, one law, thousands of identities stolen with a stroke of a pen. Walter Plecker personally wrote letters to local registrars, ordering them to change racial classifications. He kept lists of suspicious surnames, families he believed were trying to pass as white or Indian when they had African blood. He destroyed families, he destroyed communities, and he did it all legally. But here's what Walter Plecker didn't count on. Names remember what papers forget. If your last name is Goins, Bunch, Collins, or Gibson in the Carolinas, you're almost certainly descendant from the Lumbee or Melungeon communities, groups that mixed African, Native, and European blood so thoroughly that the government gave up trying to classify them. They just created a new category, other. If you were a Johnson, a Caesar, or a Bowlegs...
This is where the ethnogenesis come in. They mix the Africans, the black Indians, and the white man, and start mixing them and breeding them, and we come up with a whole new race. And we are the FBAs, Foundation Black Americans, and the Black Israelites that the Bible speaks of.
Oklahoma, there's a strong chance you descend from black Seminoles who fought alongside Osceola in the Seminole Wars. If your family name is Brunner, Grayson, or Perryman from the Creek Nation, your ancestors might have been on both the blood roll and the freedman's roll, depending on which year the census taker came by. Your name is a receipt, a paper trail they couldn't completely erase, because while they could change the documents, they couldn't go back and change every family story, every surname,